This PowerPoint presentation is titled, I Work Hard to Look This Good, I Was Born This Way, by Brenda Pomeroy in the class of Philosophy of Ethics, Professor Jordan Seidel. We are debating of the regulation of lookism, and Group D is against regulating lookism. Lookism is prejudice towards people because of their appearance. It has been receiving increasing attention and is becoming an important equal opportunity issue. People we find attractive are given preferred treatment, and people we find unattractive are denied opportunities. According to recent labor market research, attractiveness receives a premium and unattractiveness receives a penalty for both men and women. The issue being is, how do you determine whether someone is ugly or someone is deserved an amount because they have less contributions of a physical appearance? Social scientists have been accumulating evidence for beauty prejudice or discrimination, lookism, even for good purposes, but they are unable or unwilling to pass judgment on the justice or injustice of lookism. We need a moral argument that lookism is unjust and that some kind of policy intervention is justified. Group D has several listings of why regulating lookism is not beneficial and almost impossible to do. There is no way to morally come up with a justification of regulating lookism and how to make this uphold in the court of law and become a law of a discrimination. We do not see how any policy interventions to redress beauty discrimination can be justified. We have the problem of clearly deciding when beauty discrimination has even occurred. The basic contours of beauty may be universal, but there may well be a greater range for what counts as good looks in the eye of the beholder than what counts as race, gender, ethnicity, age, and handicap. Even discrimination based on those categories is often difficult to establish in a fact. Beauty discrimination is certainly more difficult to prove. To summarize Group D's arguments, appearance is subjective by nature. There is no baseline standard of beauty. Passing a federal law will increase frivolous lawsuits. Many industries and companies would collapse if a law was adopted. Regulating lookism would not end the issue of appearance discrimination. Government should not be involved in the matter of appearance. Our country is growing increasingly in accepting the difference that has been displayed daily in appearance. It is the melting pot of variety in looks. Regulating lookism creates an image by law that if you're born with good looks, work hard at looking good and staying fit or spending money to create a certain look, this then creates the display that you are causing an unjust and an unfairness to those less fortunate in appearance. Is that truly unjust? How was the term lookism even established? It was more of a modern term, and when we think about the issues, two terms were first thought of. One being aestheticism, or the second being physicalism. After all, the kind of discrimination that was being discussed was about the reaction to a body as well as the face. The victims were among short men, tall women, however, otherwise aesthetically unobjectable. Besides the visible body, other routinely discriminations could be based off accent, tone, or voice and smell. Yet these did not warrant a category. Physicalism and aestheticalism did not fit the term that we wanted to use, that wanted to be used. The choice then went to looksism and lookism. It seemed that looksism with an S in the middle implied a somewhat objective situation in which one has one's looks as one has one's social markers of race, class, and gender. Although it would emphasize the role of psychology and attractiveness, it would tend to slight the role of culture and individual taste and personal appearance. Lookism, on the other hand, carries a suggestion of person's looks and or styles, and thus tends to skew the discussion towards the opposite pole, matters of culture and taste. This is how lookism was selected to be the term, because it did not imply one, or it implied that it could be about looks and about the style. The term lookism was first coined also within the fat acceptance movement. It was used in the Washington Post magazine in 1978, which asserted that the term was coined by fat people who created the word to refer to discrimination based on looks. In the 70s is when more of this modern term was started to be talked about, and then clearly in 1978 with the fat acceptance movement is when it was more coined and starting to be used in our medias and in our societies. The fat acceptance movement was a group of people that were larger getting together and finding more of a culture acceptance within a community of themselves, and saying that being fat is okay and we can work hard and we can have marriage and we can have soulmates and we can be found attractive, and fat is a look that is okay and you don't have to be skinny. And so they really grouped together to support one another and have society accept and stop discriminating against fat people. And so in 1978 that was established. The issue is that there are people, such as Group C, that feel that there should be laws for appearance discrimination and set in place for those that don't have a certain look or that are classified in a sense as ugly. Some of their supports that they had listed is that people in such state of like Korea, a nation of Korea, they feel that they're putting their health at risk because they want to have a certain appearance, a certain color even. The paler they are, the more status that they have, the better status that they have. So they're definitely putting their health at risk for the benefits of this purpose and this appearance and status. They state that better looking people get paid more, that they get higher rates of pay, that they get better insurance, that they have better job opportunities because they have a certain physical appearance, that they are quote unquote beautiful, and that the less fortunate in looks, those that are more classified as ugly, do not get paid as much. There's documents of suicidal thoughts that are higher in those that feel that they're not pretty, and that they are being judged because they're not pretty, they're not good enough. It destroys their self-esteem and feels that physical appearance makes such a huge difference, and that there's laws that should protect that from happening. Then they also state that good-looking people have a better social advantage. For example, if you go into a bar and you're better looking, you're going to be served faster. You're going to be presentable or presented quicker than somebody that isn't as good-looking. So, that too, they say good-looking people have social advantages. Employers are looking for certain traits. This is true. They talk about Hooters and how it is not fair for Hooters to expect their waitresses to have a certain appearance. They need to have, for example,
a certain waistline in their image. They need to be able to wear their attire that they have them wear, the tank tops and the short shorts with the stockings. They feel that their customers come into Hooters to have service provided to them by a certain appeal, and that is physically discrimination against those that don't fit that. So there should be a law against that. Heavier women should be able to work at Hooters, especially in the case that they can serve just as good and if not better to the quality of a waitress standard. So just because they're heavy does not seem fair that they cannot work at Hooters. Denial in jobs due to looking too good, because there is temptation. People are not getting hired because they look too good, and in the fear that the employer, the boss, would have temptations of being misappropriate to them, or inappropriate, I should say. So that has also became one of the justifications for creating a law against physical appearance discrimination. They think that Group C and others think that teachers believe that attractive people have an advantage academically, and that because you are better looking, you are stereotyped as being smarter, and that those that aren't as good looking are looked upon as not having those qualifications, and that again is not fair. They addressed Elliott Larson's Civil Rights Act, and this act actually defines civil rights to prohibit discriminatory practices, policies, and customs in the exercise of those rights based upon religion, race, color, national origin, age, sex, height, weight, family status, or marital status even. It preserves the confidentiality of records regarding arrest, detention, or other depositions in which a conviction does not result, to prescribe the powers and duties of the Civil Rights Commission and the Department of Civil Rights to provide remedies and penalties, to provide for fees, and to repeal certain acts and parts of these acts. So this law has already been put into place in all of those categories, and they are wanting physical appearance. They want lookism to be added into that class and become a law, a protection for those that are not qualified as beautiful. They want that added. They want lookism, physical appearance added to this accreditational law. Now that we have heard, or I have listed reasons of wanting to have a law to regulate lookism, I will be providing support against regulating lookism, not wanting to have a law that it's not necessary. It's conflicting. I will be giving examples and support of why we do not have to have a law regulating lookism. One of the supports that I will discuss right now is that it's role models, leading by examples, that if you put a law into effect, it could actually have more people getting hired, employers, in this case, school districts, hiring those that are not physically appeared to be for example, a phys ed teacher. They want more of the thought to be leading by example, that a physical fit phys ed teacher would have more impact on students, and in a way that if you work hard, you can remain physically fit, and the attributes of being healthy and physically fit, and they look at PE teachers as role models. There is this journal article here that talked about a student, or I shouldn't say student, a school hiring a phys ed teacher and having one there that actually put on a pretend looking a stomach, something that made her appear bigger, unfit, and they had a test done of how more effective she was between the grades of 4th, 5th, and 6th. It turns out that when she wasn't wearing the pretend bodysuit of being overweight, the 4th and 5th graders responded better to her because she was in more of a physical appearance, and she physically was fit. And the sixth graders, on the other hand, that class, it showed that it didn't really matter, actually, that when she had her bodysuit on, it didn't really matter. And they still participated in the PE class. Point being, though, that if you start to regulate physical appearance and how you would even do that, it could affect employers such as schools from having to hire certain people that cannot perform the job description, the job duty. They cannot have a beneficial impact on, in this case, students, because they aren't physically fit to do what is expected of them to do. It would be more do what I say, not as I do, and not leading by example, because employers, schools in this case, would be afraid of being sued, being accused of discrimination because of physical appearance. So it's just opening those doors for that to happen. Opposing arguments would state and have stated that people that are beautiful have advantages in jobs and that they get better jobs and they would be hired before somebody that is ugly. The fact is that people that are beautiful also have a disadvantage in getting hired for certain jobs because the employer feel a certain way that they're entitled. Example being that in this journal article, perceived entitlement causes discrimination against attractive job candidates in the domain of relatively less desirable jobs. It does state that attractive people will not be hired by employers because of the entitlement fact that they feel. They argue that the perception that attractive people feel entitled to good outcomes can be costly for attractive candidates applying for relatively less desirable jobs. When decision makers select among candidates for a relatively less desirable job, they are likely to predict that the attractive candidates who they perceive as feeling entitled to good outcomes would be likely to be dissatisfied working on a relatively less desirable job. So in that case, it is stating that because you are good looking, we will not hire you. It is a disadvantage in this case because they think that you're too good for the job, and that is not acceptable. When a person applies to a job, it goes both ways. Obviously, they are there to work, and just because you're beautiful doesn't mean that you're going to not want the job. And employers' first impression is they're too beautiful and they're not going to want this undesirable job. They won't be here that long. They're going to expect certain things, and that is a misleading representation for beautiful people as well. To add to supporting factors of not needing to regulate lookism is that there's this article by Warner. It's called Preconceptions of the Ideal, Ethnic and Physical Diversity Fashion. To summarize this article, it talks about, already having those that are not just Caucasian on runways and dealing with that already, that there are percentages that do have different colored, different race models, and that this is already on the uprising of adding in more and differentiations of races and colors of the skin, and they're not just particularly Caucasian models. So we are already seeing a difference in, for example, runway models. It also talked about how there has been implications already for wanting the safety and the health factors for models, particularly because of the appearance that they're supposed to have, and that they do have laws into effect in many, many countries, including United States. They are in variance, but, they do require that doctors do oversee the health and safety of models, what their weight is. Are they, too heavy? Are they too small? How are they losing weight? Are they eating healthy? So there are safety factors already put into place to make sure that what the demand of appearance in cases of runway models or models in general, depending on who they're targeting and what employer they have, what look they want, there are safety factors put in place. So there's no need to regulate because we already are aware that because of appearance and the demands on it, that we have to make sure that, everyone is being safe, especially in regards to modeling. We talk about several different laws being put into place for discrimination. There are so many discrimination laws already that we have. We have laws that are on discrimination for harassment on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, genetic information, age, the retaliation against an individual for filing a charge of discrimination, participating in an investigation, or opposing discriminatory practices. Those are already protected. Employment decision based on stereotypes or assumptions about the abilities, traits, or performed of individuals of a certain sex, race, age, religion, or ethnic group, or individuals with disabilities, or based on myths or assumptions about an individual's genetic information. Those are protected. There's laws protecting that. Denying employment opportunities to a person because of marriage or association with an individual of a particular race, religion, national origin, or an individual with a disability. There's Title VII that also prohibits discrimination because of the participation in schools or places of worship associated with a particular race, ethnic, or religious group. So there are several laws enforcing discrimination and not being allowed to discriminate against a particular person, race, category, and there's several. So the question is this going to be conflicting? Is it going to be conflicting on those laws that are already there? Do we need to have a physical appearance law put in place? Do we need government to regulate this law? And we will have to say on this side, no, we do not need it. There is an author, Muskayan, that in their journal, the article explores the effectiveness of current discrimination laws and suggests that today's statutory laws, particularly the Title VII, center too much around intentional discrimination, meaning they fail to eliminate the negative effects for victims of unconscious discrimination. The research in that article in return could be used to develop the point that regulatory effects concerning lookism would be inadequate and that the true protection could only result from enacting laws that are overreaching or in conflict with the existing laws that I had just named off. There are several laws already in existence. Physical appearance or lookism does not have to be added, and there is no need for a government to regulate lookism. With the topic of lookism and in society and being so sensitive and needing to place protections against peoples with disadvantages in their own way of thinking is creating a bigger problem. We really need to be able to handle it ourselves and not have to put up another law and have the government be able to be involved in that because of the law. It would be impossible, in my opinion, to give a verdict of guilty because you thought somebody was too ugly. And then again, in question is, once that verdict is given, then what is the right compensation? What happens after that? How much is that judgment worth? Who's going to decide that? Do we think it's necessary? No. We need to just be able to handle things on our own. And in a sense, like in this article, Lessons in the War for Self-Love, this woman stood up for herself. She said enough's enough. And the business that she worked for, they did not retaliate. They knew they couldn't, but she just stood up for herself. And she didn't think that her appearance needed to be with, in this case, the employer wanted her to take another picture because they were going to put it on the wall in a hospital. And she was tired of basically trying to model what they thought would be acceptable in the appearance of herself. And they wanted her to put more makeup on and, this type of a smile. And finally she said, no, I'm not. I am who I am. I'm working here because I'm good at my job, and it's not about what I look like. I'm not doing it. She stood up for herself, and it made a difference. We didn't have to have a law put in place because of lookism. There was no governing need to be involved. She stood up for herself. She still has her job. She was still effective. The picture went on the wall without having to be taken again with more makeup, just because she stood up for herself. You know, another topic too that is leading into appearance being more acceptable is this huge selfie exposure that we're doing. Everyone is taking selfies. So the self-image is becoming more and more acceptable. And there are filters that can make you feel more beautiful. And everyone is wanting to be this. So there's not that big of an issue because it is becoming more acceptable in our society. The selfie era is helping us adapt to that. There's filters, there's plastic surgeries, there's cosmetics that people are buying because everyone wants to look better. People want to feel better about themselves. You know, there's choices that you don't need to do this, and that again is your choice. Do we have to have government involved because someone feels that it's unfair, it's unjust, that somebody's prettier than another person, that they think that they're being discriminated against because they are uglier? No, we don't need laws put into effect. There doesn't need to be regulations against lookism. We are moving forward in our society. We're moving forward in our cultures. You know, speaking of cultures, different countries view image and appearance differently anyways. There are countries that have their women putting huge holes in their faces, earrings in their faces, piercings all over, and the more that you have, the bigger the hole, the more beautiful you are. In the United States, that probably would not be viewed as beautiful. So, you know, it depends on who the person is and who's going to be able to judge that. What one person views as beautiful does not morally mean that the other person feels that they're not. It's not an issue, and we don't need to make it an issue. There are plenty of laws in effect to protect discrimination. Lookism does not need to be governed, does not need to have a law stated to protect those that, in a sense, are uglier and feel threatened because beautiful people get this or that. It's not an issue. We have to be able to stand up for ourselves and speak for ourselves and not have government involved in this law or in this topic, because again, once they are, who decides on how much your ugliness is worth? The argument is, if lookism should be regulated, we have provided, or I have provided, information in this PowerPoint from Group C that has given their opinion and their research on why they feel lookism should be regulated. They feel beautiful people have an advantage against uglier people. They feel that it is unhealthy. It's not safe for their health because of the appearance that they're trying to uphold and the pressure of being beautiful. They just feel that it's an unjust, it's not fair on how people that are beautiful get a better job, people that are beautiful get paid more, and that they need a regulation and that this should be added to the discrimination acts. Group D and myself feel that there is no need to have lookism regulated. We don't need to have government ruling on lookism. They don't need to be involved in this circumstance. We can handle and make our own decisions on how to handle physical appearance, and it doesn't need to be added to the discrimination acts. We learned in our readings through the chapters that we have read that John Rawls has talked about rather not contractualism, would be necessary, not in lookism, because it wasn't such approached when he was making his theory. You know, he didn't think about the rules of somebody's physical appearance being to that they now see it as a disadvantage and that they're getting lack of support because that somebody's uglier than another person. But contractualism, it accounts for the central moral rules, and that is why they are rational, self-interested people, free of coercion. They would agree to obey them so long as other people are willing to obey them. The rules of cooperation must be designed to benefit everyone, not just a few. So even with the veil of ignorance being applied from Rawls, we are still trying to decide if this rule needs to be applied and if it's sincerely going to benefit everyone. And again, the big question is who is going to decide on not just the ruling, but what is going to be the judgment, and who is going to decide on what would be the ugly standard. We also talk about John Rawls' theory as well, and in this as an ethical statement, that he discussed that in John Rawls' theory, all social primary goods should be distributed equally, unless an unequal distribution would benefit the least advantaged. Rawls included the exception in order to compensate those who were not fortunate in, let's say, the natural lottery. The exception is one part of Rawls in this is the famous difference principle. Although natural assets or social circumstances are not deserved, they should not necessarily be eliminated. And that is what somebody in Group C is arguing. The difference principle provides Rawls is with a way to justify inequalities, but only if the inequalities compensate the less fortunate by increasing their advantages. This again is, how do we determine that? How does somebody determine an ugly factor? Who is ugly and what is the standard of that? Who's going to determine that? And then what is the compensation? After we talk about Rawls too, what are the policy implications? That's what we're talking about. What are the policy implications of Rawls' theory of justice? The basic problem is that there is no way to determine all the effects of beauty discrimination. Remarkably, upon reflection, it becomes apparent that the implications, such as they are incoherent. If beautiful people receive more and better opportunities and greater financial rewards, and they improve their welfare of the less beautiful and even ugly, for example, through increases in productivity, then a beauty premium cannot be considered unjust. The difference principle justifies, which is Group C and all those, is the difference principle justifies a premium. Beauty discrimination is unlike discrimination based on race and gender, which can never benefit those who are discriminated against. If, however, beauty discrimination does not benefit the less beautiful, it is unjust and subject to same moral and legal sanctions as discrimination based on race and gender. That is what the argument is, that there should be an added law for beauty discrimination, and we feel there should not be any regulation necessary. The penalty for ugliness that social sciences have uncovered is a different matter. There is an issue that did not arise for what John Rawls was familiar with when he was writing his theories, probably because he did not imagine that the individuals receive a penalty for their lack of their natural asset. One might receive a benefit for natural talents and abilities, but not a penalty for their absence. One implication of Rawls' theory is that ugliness is arbitrary from a moral point of view, that it clearly does not qualify for an exception under the difference principle, and that is therefore unjust. In this case, ugliness might be classified as a disability and perhaps legally included under the Americans with Disability Act. One does wonder, however, if it can be said, empirically demonstrated, that ugliness substantially limits one or more of an individual's life activities, and what might be the reasonable accommodation of a disability of ugliness entailing. This again is added to that argument. As John Rawls stated in 71, this is added to that argument. There might be beautiful people. There might be jobs that are serving beautiful people more than ugly people. There might be morals to not having somebody get discriminated against because they don't have an appearance factor working on their side. But that isn't the question. The question is is who is going to decide on the standard of ugliness? Who is going to decide on how much somebody's ugliness is worth once somebody has been given the verdict that they've been guilty of physical appearance discrimination or lookism? So there are so many acts of discrimination and laws that protect discrimination, but this does not need to be added to that. There is no grounds for protecting a group as a whole. As stated before, society is accepting appearance. People are wanting to become more beautiful. They're using filters. They're getting plastic surgery. They're, having cosmetics applied to their face because they want to be physically appearing more beautiful. Ugly people, they do have a disadvantage in the looks in that sense, but there are ways to make them more beautiful, and it is their choice. We are moving forward as a society, and this is becoming more acceptable. If you put a regulation, if you put a law on lookism and have a discrimination for ugly people, then where does it stop? We're protecting the uglier and the disadvantaged people. Where does it stop? The next thing we're going to have is somebody wanting to protect the less intelligent. And again, is there a need for this law? There is not. Do we need to regulate lookism? We do not. The person to have a standard, who is going to make that standard and say that, okay, from this type of person's looks is viewed as ugly, and then it's scaled to 1 in 10. Again, who is going to set the standard of ugly? There should not be a law, and there should not be a regulation for lookism, and we as a society can justice this on our own. We don't need to add this to the discrimination of.